To Alabama week, and the work week is nearly over, so something to celebrate.
Well, you're all of a sudden you're into this.
Or Sam.
We got our purple and gold mic cables for you and I today. You just unpacked those from your magic box of equipment tricks.
Get festive. Look
at that. Look at that. Purple and gold.
Gold.
Just in time. Hi, Marsanne.
Go Tigers.
How are you? Marsanne Goldsby is here. I think she's keeping an eye on you, Kevin. Me, she loves.
Yeah.
You, not so much.
She keeps a pretty close watch on me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to see you. You look terrific, by the way.
There's a lot going on. Live after 5 this evening. The weather guessers say it's going to be dry. It'll be somewhat cooler, but that's nice. If you're out there jumping around with the band and all that.
It's going to get cold tonight. Down in the upper 30s tonight.
Yeah, but not for Live After 5. It'll be in the 50s still. For Live After 5. And we've got a lot going on. Veterans Day is coming up. The United States Marine Corps birthday happens the day before Veterans Day. We've got an honest-to-God, no crap, all green, squared away, clean Marine who will be joining us after Chief Murphy Paul.
Leroy Jethro Gibbs?
Almost.
It's my favorite Marine.
Colonel Walt Green.
Hey, Walt's going to be here. That's awesome.
Former U.S. attorney. He still tries cases as a JAG officer in the United States Marine Corps. And he's going to bring with him John Gable, who is also a Marine, who's going to tell us the story of Veterans Day through his eyes, as he had a son that was killed in action in Afghanistan not too long ago. But there are a lot of traditions that go along with that, so we will have them both with us. Also, Kevin asked me, do you have any bad news to report? In other words, badly written, poor grammar, egregious mistakes, and the answer is no.
See, that's amazing, and good for the news media.
But I want to pass a compliment on to our friends at Channel 9. Occasionally, in the control room, someone hits the wrong button, and the wrong piece of video rolls. And they were talking about this horrendous case in Livingston Parish of the sheriff's deputy that is now in jail and charged with many, many counts of sexual abuse of juveniles, child pornography, and his wife. And there was an allegation that he had adulterated some party cakes for kids with some bodily fluids. That was the story they were reporting on.
Nicely put.
Yes, thank you. And unfortunately, in the control room, somebody hit the wrong tape, and there was full screen a gentleman who had nothing to do with this story and was involved in another news story that wasn't related to this. And Greg Merriweather, Eagle Eye, said, "That's the wrong tape. That is the wrong tape. That is not the accused deputy." Greg caught it when they came back. He apologized for it. At the end of the cast, he said, "Look, we ran that tape wrong. It was a mistake, and that is not the guy who was accused of all these things." So Greg did a really good job of making a bare hand catch in left field.
Good job, Street Beat.
Yeah, good job, Greg. So
I love
credit
that guy.
Credit where credit is due. I want to talk about something very serious. You probably saw this.
We're going to talk about Salassi's.
Oh, you want to talk about Salassi's
That's
first?
very serious.
Yes. All right.
So let's talk about it. Yesterday, we were out at Salassi's. We had a wonderful time doing a little 2-hour live broadcast. And we are going to, we were aware we had some transmission problems with the live broadcast, something to do with the LTE network out there in Denham. But I want you to get on by because it is a great place to go. Salassi's, we want them to become your jewelry store. Yes, it's a drive out to Denham, but it's that old phrase, if you drive a little, you're going to save a lot. And you'll also get a jeweler that you can have a personal relationship with. Stuart Salassi, a certified GIA diamond graduate, which means he really, really knows his stuff when it comes to diamonds. They design, they build, they repair, they do appraisals. Bill and I have talked about this a couple times. If you or the missus have some good, fine jewelry in the home, and you haven't had that collection of jewelry appraised so that you can get a rider on your homeowner's insurance, what's homeowners at your house? $10,000 for contents of house? That's what mine is.
Yeah. We have a rider because,
of course, you know,
we've been married for 30-some odd years, and Karen's got a lot of jewelry.
Average homeowner's policy is going to be $5,000, maybe $10,000 for the contents of your house. And I don't know about your house. I live a modest life, and $10,000 won't even begin to cover it, let alone Mary Ann's jewelry should something happen. So I'm going to recommend that you contact Stuart Salassi at Salassi's. That's 271-8641, and set yourself up an appointment. He will appraise your collection so that you can get an insurance rider. And, of course, they've got terrific jewelry and gifts. You just have to see this beautiful 3,000 square foot store.
It is terrific. Now, on to our main topic of the day. If you were following national news last week, the International Association of Police Chiefs had their annual meeting, and they spent a lot of time addressing what is unfortunately a growing problem in our nation, and that is police officer suicide. It is so important that the federal government actually put together a $45 million grant that is going to be distributed to police agencies around this country to help them put programs into place to recognize officers who may be at risk for harming themselves, to educate the public about officers and sensitivities to officers, and to actually provide treatment where necessary for officers that are at risk. Nobody that's more in tune with the needs of his officers than our own Chief Murphy Paul. I know he is a member of the IACP. And Chief, this is one of these that's a lot harder to talk about than just uniform crime statistics. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you doing today, sir?
We're doing well, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, this is a very important topic, and it was one that was heavily discussed at the conference in Chicago. When we look at
Oh, I know what it is.
yearly stats, and when we see the increase in suicides nationally, I believe when I last looked this year, we were probably around 195 already. And we still have a couple of months to go. And fall of 2018, there was about 169 suicides of police officers. So when we actually see violence in custody, in line of duty deaths going down, we're seeing suicides go up. So the question is, what's causing that?
Well, yeah, and it used to be for cops in urban departments, it was domestic violence calls were the most dangerous, followed by car accidents where people are T-boning them as they're trying to get to help people. Now we see this suicide is rising a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of factors we believe that go into place. I mean, obviously, each one of these incidents requires its own examination to determine, what made an officer do that. But I think that, one of the things we have to acknowledge and recognize is we, law enforcement community, we have to do a better job in creating an environment where our police officers feel safe to say they need help. And that's one of the things that we're doing in the Baton Rouge Police Department with our Officer Wellness Program that's being led by Rindy Richard. And we're taking a three-tier design approach to that. And that first one is peer support, to have that support immediately following critical incidents that a police officer may have. The second is stress coaching and providing support and education through our partnership with Under the Shield, not just for the police officers, but for their family members as well. Because we recognize in situations like this, it's usually a family member, a loved one, who's the first to see those signs when a police officer is going through something. So it's creating that three-tiered approach, and the third is our mental health clinicians, making sure that we have professionals on staff, are contracted with, to help our officers get through those issues that they're dealing with, and to make sure that those professionals are trained and understand what we do every day.
Yeah.
So they're going to go through training from ride-alongs to looking at the academy, and we're going to put them through intense training so they can have a better understanding on the trauma that our police officers face on a daily basis.
Chief, one of the things that has always been problematic with people in public positions, police officers, firefighters, EMS, doctors, nurses, is if they're starting to feel hopeless and desperate, they don't want to go to the psychologist because they don't want anything written on paper and they don't want it on their record. They're worried that it can affect their chances for promotion or, affect their future job performance, or they lose the trust of those that they work with. How do you get around a rock that big?
Well, when I talk about that environment, it's how do we break that stigma, because it is a reality. And I think one is through education, right? Educating them, not just the public, but our officers, where they feel safe and know that we understand that you're human, and what you're experiencing is normal. There is nothing abnormal about what they experience. Mm-hmm. So it's communicating. Look, that is normal. A lot of us go through it. We just don't always admit it, right?
True.
The stress that goes on to the job. So I think that when we have these sessions like we're having, and we create opportunities where these police officers can provide, can go out and get the services that they need, because we want them to be mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared when they come to work and they're responding to calls for services, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're having conversations. We had a whole staff looking at training at IACP. We have a meeting, I believe, next week to talk about some of the best practices we looked at as we began to put our program together. We have an expert coming down, I believe, this month from San Antonio as part of our collective healing grant, which was issued to us through partnership with the IACP. So I think that we're going to have some a process and systems in place that our police officers are going to be comfortable with.
Leading up to this point, what led to so many officers not being willing to discuss? And I'm speaking in generalities,
Yeah,
not in terms of your department. Is it the the kind of macho He-Man kind of culture of police work? Or?
Yeah, I think it's a culture issue. With law enforcement in general, and I think every agency have their subcultures, right? That we don't like to tell our business. And then look, there's fear. There's legitimate fears that guys got because they don't want to be labeled a certain way. The last thing a police officer wants is to be in a position where he feels his gun and his badge is going to be taken away because he's expressed something that he's going through. And I keep saying that law enforcement, I'm speaking of leadership in law enforcement, we have to do a better job. And I tell you, we are. That was one of the biggest topics that were talked about at IECP. We not only just talked about how we can be better in creating those environments where police officers are comfortable, but also looking at it from a generational standpoint. Millennials, the next generation, those are our leaders, those are our future leaders. And the reality is some of the older school guys, like myself and others, who may think a little different when you look at it from generational, what makes each different generation tick or what motivates them, we have to adapt to the next generation because they're not going nowhere, but yet we are.
Well, and
so we have to embrace that with an understanding, how do we reach them based on the data that shows us what makes the next generation tick.
I was trying to do a little homework on this with the information that IACP put out and did some reading. And one of the things that struck me is that, well, actually two things. Number one, this isn't your standard PTSD in most cases. We've got a lot of good clinical experience with military and PTSD, and that's usually a precipitating incident. That one shell that got too close and they watched their buddies die. Why did I walk away? This has the tendency to be cumulative from what I was reading. It's the kind of thing that builds up. It's small thing, then big thing, then small thing. And suddenly you've got an officer feeling desperate, alone, things like that. And then there's the fact that you've still got to get past the actual truth of the situation where it's better for you, Officer Gallagher, if you go and talk to somebody on your own because you get to write the script than if I have to send you with an order, because then it becomes very official. And it's kind of hard to work through those things, isn't it, Chief?
Well, it is, but I think you brought up an interesting point, the military, because I think we can look at the military and look at how they addressed it. When we go back and we look at the Civil War, I believe the military, the government referred to it as the soldier's heart. And then when we go back and we look at World War I, it was shell shock. Was the word that was being used when our soldiers were coming back. And then World War II, it went to combat fatigue, I believe is the words that were used. And it really wasn't until the Vietnam War where we had our heroes coming home and they were suffering from mental illnesses. And it was then that we really got to that PTSD, right? Diagnosis, the post-traumatic stress disorder. So looking at how the military took that approach and looking at, if you remember, the post office. Y'all remember
going
postal. And what happened?
And it's been, 20, 25 years since one of those incidents happened.
Why? Because they addressed it.
They attacked the problem.
And what we really need to look at is, we got to teach that You know, when we tell police officers that you are not messed up, you're normal because you're human. And when we begin to have those conversations and understand what classic conditioning is, and when we begin to empower our officers and their family, because that's the key portion, you got to get their families involved. I think it is preventable, guys. I think it's preventable. We see the work that's been going on in the military. So I think acknowledging that we have these issues, providing the services. You know, when you look at all of these incidents, there were signs, there were indicators, and there were warnings. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate family members on what those signs look like. And when you see it, here's some options and some things that we can do to prevent that next one from happening.
No, we have been fortunate as we have not had any reported suicides among active duty BRPD officers in the last few years, have we?
Yes, we have.
Have we?
Yeah, we had one last year in 2018. We lost one of our officers.
I'm sorry, I
That's a
forgot
shame.
about that.
Sorry
yeah.
about that.
Yes.
So we'd like to keep it right there. We would like to have no more.
Exactly. We don't. You know, that's sad. You know, you don't just think about what that young man's family experiences and were there opportunities for intervention, were there things we could have done better. But the reality, when something like that happens, his whole squad is impacted. You know, those police officers who work with him every day. Did I miss something? Did I see something? What could I have done? And that's why it's education is so important. Look, these are normal things that human beings go through. And we have to normalize it and not stigmatize it. And I think once we do that as a law enforcement agency, as leaders, and even as a community in understanding the importance of officer wellness, I think we begin to move in a direction where police officers are safe to say, hey, I need a timeout. I need a break.
I'm curious, is there going to be like a mandatory element of this and then a voluntary element for the officers as well, or how's it going to work out?
You know, we're talking to experts about that. I think that when you start talking about mandatory, I think that, you know, when there are critical incidents, right, officer-involved shootings, certain deaths, certain experiences that our police officers go through that we know creates trauma, there is some mandatory debriefings that we recommend. But I think when it comes to officers trying to get help with going through things, I really think that that has to be something that's on a voluntary basis. You know, unless we as leaders see something where we think that someone may be going through a mental health crisis at the time, and we have to address that immediately, which is not the norm, by the way. But I think we do have to create an environment where police feel safe when they don't believe that the administration has anything to do with it. So creating those outlets where they can get the services, where there's not this fear that the chief or somebody is going to know or that their business is going to get out there. So I think as a start, we got to make sure that that is separate, that we encourage it, we support it, but the last thing we want is our police officers to fear that their information is going to get out there, they're going to be judged. So we have to be very strategic on how we lay this out in the initial stages. And as that trust builds, we should be evaluating it on a yearly basis.
Chief, I want to talk about the mechanics a little bit, if you don't mind. If you have psychologists that you know can deal with these type of stressors and have a positive outcome, whether you have them on staff or whether you have a professional agreement with them, is it important to have it off-site? In other words, I don't want to go see the department psychologist if their door is 2 doors from yours.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It has to be clear and separate. Yeah, it definitely has to be. We don't want to stigmatize these guys in any kind of way. And because this is a new program that we're implementing, there's a lot of conversation going on about that and how we can protect those officers' rights as it relates to what they're going through. So no, I agree. It will not be on site. It will definitely be separate and apart. And I think we're moving in the right direction when it comes to.
And again, I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
When I worked in the emergency room at Cook County many years ago, a lot of trauma.
Yep.
But my mother was also dying in the same hospital. And someone who had become a friend, who was a psychiatric resident, said, "You need to talk to somebody about this, and you need to do it now." And I looked at him, very, very smart ass, and I said, "I just had my finger inside somebody's thigh, holding their artery up against the bone so they wouldn't bleed out. And you don't think I cried enough for my mom, and that's why I need to see a shrink?" And it played out right in front of everybody. And the first thing I said was, "Boy, that was stupid." And then I ended up going to see him at his office, off-site,
Yeah.
and had 3 good, productive sessions. But I know, I don't know if you've ever been to counseling or you've ever been to counseling.
I've been to grief counseling,
Yeah, you don't want to see your colleagues and your friends and your coworkers, because even if they're trying to help, you're going to feel bad about it. Kevin, you okay?
Well, and there's I think an element of humanity that there's going to be somebody that's going to crack a joke or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you discourage that, but I mean, what can you do? Somebody might make somebody feel uncomfortable because they're seeking counseling. The question for you, and I'm going to relate this to not a personal experience, but personal history. I had an acquaintance that was a PIO for the New Orleans police when I worked in that city. And I'd fallen out of touch with him because I moved up to Baton Rouge and everything. And along comes Hurricane Katrina. And in the aftermath of Katrina, I hear that this fellow that I knew that was, still a PIO with New Orleans police committed suicide. So this kind of stress can be something that doesn't just affect your cops that are right there on the scene at the beat. It can affect anybody in different ways.
Yeah, it does. And when you and that's having a conversation about it, just like we're talking now, this is a good thing. Teaching officers that you're not messed up when you experience that, right? You're normal. But there's a culture in law enforcement, when you speak of an emotional or psychological injury, there are consequences. And that's the perception.
Yeah.
This brotherhood, this pride. And so what we're teaching and we're communicating, are you helping? It's your responsibility to help each other. And when you see your partner, look, our police officers, some of them are spending more time with their partners than they do with their family members because they're working long hours. And, you're supposed to take care of family. So it's your responsibility to help. You're not hurting somebody when you say, "Hey, Sarge, hey, Lieutenant, so-and-so, Officer so-and-so is going through something. He's experiencing it. Can we have a conversation with him?" And here's the thing. It's happening in our agency, y'all. It is happening. I respect privacy. I respect our officers' right. But we know that we have officers that are out there getting help. When we talk about divorce, look, when you look at it, and I've been through that experience before, and that's not a good experience. But you have an officer going through something like that, a divorce or issues with their children, and then they have to come to work every day and police and bring that stress that's related to whatever they're going on in their personal life.
Well,
we have to give them outlets to manage
Let's
that.
talk financial stress, too.
And
We don't pay our
absolutely.
cops enough in this city.
Absolutely
I'll say
not.
it, and I'll say it, and I'll say it. We don't pay our cops enough in this city.
You can say it one more time. Say it one more
We
time.
don't
for
pay
me.
our
All
cops
right.
enough in this city. And that financial stress. Look, as someone, along with Kevin, got
Yeah.
laid off from my regular gig in April, you know what? You get about 25 days down the road and you start feeling that stress, you don't know what it is. By day 30, you know what it is.
Yes, sir.
It's your bank account.
Yes, sir. And that does. It does create stress in officers. And, we've been a champion in supporting a pay raise for our officers. But I tell you, one of the things, we started this conversation off with the IACP conference. And I know I was asked what stood out the most about that. With all the classes we went through, we had about 7 officers that were present there going to different training modules. We sat on about 4 different presentations where we talked about what's going on in Baton Rouge, where we sat on these sessions. But what was interesting is talking to law enforcement leaders and listening to what our other agencies are doing. The Baton Rouge Police Department is far, far ahead of many of our law enforcement agencies. And look, I put our officers up against the best of them. And I'm proud of the work that the men and women are doing here. I'm proud of where we're going as an agencies. And not only am I proud, there are other law enforcement agencies that want to be where we are. And when you pay attention what's going on, not only in America, but but just in the capital area, we're doing good work. There's a lot of agencies that I believe would love to be where we're at when it comes to policing.
Before we let you go, I'd kind of like to get a progress report. How's the community relationship going? I mean, we all know that at one time it was quite strained.
Yeah, so interesting you would say that. Yesterday, I participated in an event at the McKinley High Alumni, the McKinley Alumni Center, and it was on part of our collective healing. One of our partners, NAACP, actually had an event there where our department was recognized for our efforts in the area of improving community police relations. But to hear the stories and to see the PowerPoint presentation that they had, and just about every picture, there was a Baton Rouge police officer there. We participated in more than 304 events last year. And what happens is when we increase contact with law enforcement, where that contact isn't based on a negative stimulus, we can have conversations just like we're having. And that's how you build relationships. And when you build relationships, you sit down and you listen. And not listen to respond, not listen to be defensive, listens to learn about their experiences and what can we do as an agency to improve on that relationship. And to sit there yesterday and to talk about how a listening session in a community translate to information coming back to me as the chief, and I sit down with my staff and we present it to our committee. We have a committee that looks at policies and procedures, and we say, hey, this is what the community is saying. How can we address that? So to hear a listening session where the community said something, we present it to our officers, and they identify a solution to address that concern that doesn't compromise officer safety, breaks down communities, barriers in community police relations. I think that's a win-win for all of us.
Speaking of a win-win, I'm speaking only for myself now, but I really, really liked the season of First Responders Live.
Yeah.
That had BRPD and
Yeah.
had EMS and had BRFD. And I'm hoping that they've got a renewal contract sitting on your desk or the mayor's desk or whoever has to approve it, because I thought all of our agencies looked very good in that television program.
Yeah, it really good. When we were first asked to participate in that, there was a lot of, this won't happen. And what a lot of people don't realize, the mayor's office has to approve that, okay? Because those contracts actually go through the mayor's office. And it wasn't but a second when we were asked, do we want to expose that, right? The liabilities, and there was some people say this and that. We were proud of the work that our men and women are doing. And, when you hear people say, oh, we don't support our police or we don't like our police, well, look, we support and love our police so much that the mayor and I approved cameras to follow our police officers around in real time, okay, and watch everything they do, because we're proud of what they do, because we know they're doing great work. And yes, I did get a call asking if we would be willing to extend the season.
I think about that.
Oh, I love it. I like highlighting the great work that we're doing. I mean, when I look at it and I see the work that the men and women are doing, it's refreshing that the community gets to see it, and it helps paint us.
Your mouthpiece is sending you a text message she wants you to look at. She's waving her phone at me. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Listen, I was in PR for a lot of years. The best thing you can do for yourself is ignore them half the time. I'm serious.
All right.
It just helps them stand a little taller and walk a little straighter. If you 50% and maybe 48%, ignore them about half the time, you'll be fine.
Right.
Chief Paul, as always, we are very glad you took the time.
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to get into this today, but I want to know if in the next season we're going to have Gino on top of a horse in at least one episode of First Responders Live. How big that horse has to be to gallop with his big butt on it, I'm not sure. But I'd like to see at least one with Gino on top of a horse.
All right. Yes, sir. Well, look, we going to make that. Look, we got First Responders Live. We actually had a meeting yesterday with First 48. They're asking us to, if we can partner with them in filming. So, look, there's a lot of great things that's going on.
We've got a lot of really experienced detectives that would be good in that.
We got
homicide detectives here, unfortunately, have a lot of work. So,
right, and we're sitting at around 57%, or actually 58% clearance rate right now. I just looked at the numbers, which is very impressive. I think we can contribute that to our improvement in community police relations, because we can't solve crimes without the community helping us. But I'd like to say this one. Look, we're coming up on the holidays. We got the Thanksgiving season that's coming up. We got the Christmas season that's coming up. We want the public to understand that we are going to be out there enforcing DWI laws, distracted driving. We understand the holidays, and we like to partake in activities and parties. We just received an increase in a grant, and we're going to be increasing our enforcement hours for our officers, paying them overtime to be out there on our roadways and highways enforcing DWI laws. So look, get you a designated driver. It's important.
Uber, Lyft,
Lyft, or a
friend,
cab. We can't
or a
forget
cab.
the cabs. We got to highlight our cab services too. But look, be responsible when you're out there having a good time. We understand when the holidays come, we like to party. Be responsible.
We hear you. We did a show yesterday from Salassi Jewelry out in Denham Springs. Middle of the day. Watched a woman, looked to be mid-30s, get pulled over on Main Street for DUI.
Right.
You could see it. She couldn't stand up. She
Right
couldn't
on
do the
Range
field
Avenue.
sobriety. And this is like broad daylight, 2 p.m.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
please don't do that.
And I tell you, it's simple things. What you're going to pay for a cab ride, for an Uber ride, for a Lyft ride, or whatever ride, or to call a family member,
fraction
friend,
of what that DWI
it's
is
a
gonna
fraction
cost.
what that DWI is going to cost you.
Yeah, our buddy Franz Borghardt says you can get to $5,000 in no time for first offense DWI.
There you go.
Yes, Marsan, what do we have here? Which one do you want me to read?
I didn't know you were going to say something on the radio. Could you give it back?
Oh, you've spoken before. Which
You're
one do you
listening
want?
to the voice of
Oh,
Marsan Goldsby.
this is from the PD. This is on your official website. Saban drives 1 mile an hour below the speed limit in the passing lane. Go Tigers! Beat Bama. Wow. I'm worried all of these posts, although I enjoy them.
Bama hate week.
I'm worried we're whistling through the graveyard, boys and girls.
Yeah.
I have refrained from any of these comments.
Well, Chief, as always, we appreciate your time, and I hope
yes,
some kind of budgeting solution presents itself so that your officers, especially your starting pay officers,
Yes.
can get a more attractive, compensation
And we are,
package.
the mayor's office and I, we're working on that. We're having conversations about how can we identify those funds. The whole St. George situation kind of threw a monkey wrench in the program.
$48 million monkey wrench in the
absolutely.
situation.
But look, we remain committed to working towards making our police officers one of the highest paid police departments in the state. They deserve it. I'm fortunate to have worked with agencies all across Louisiana in my prior life as a state trooper. And I tell you, I'm proud, and I put our police officers up against any other agency in this state.
Well, we are glad to see you as always, and we will have you or your folks on a couple more times as we get into the holidays.
And I want to clear up. We did get a complaint on what Marsan just talked about. Nick Saban called in a complaint. I've already looked into it. We're cleared on that.
We're clear?
So, yeah, we're cleared on that. So tell him get over it.
Chief, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
You have a microphone here anytime, my
Thank you,
friend.
Chief. Appreciate it. Chief Murphy Paul.
Wow.
We're going to do a little cast change here. Walt, John, if you want to come on over. We're kind of informal here since we don't take commercial breaks. Good to see you, Marsan.
Take care, baby.
Walt, we're going to put you in this chair over here. And Kevin, if you want to fill while I arrange John.
All right, let's do that.
John, take this chair and pull it over there. Walt, we're going to
What
put
we're
you on
going to
the
talk
corner.
about next is, of course, Veterans Day is coming up on Monday, the 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month. Gino, you take care of yourself, my friend. That's, by the way, that was Gino McNeely and his large back blocking the camera shot.
Yes, yes, indeed. John, need you to move a little closer to Walt there.
Okay.
All right,
Now, John, I'm going to ask you to kind of cheat that chair around because the camera is right over your right
There
shoulder.
we go.
There we go.
Now
See
we
the
got you
red
guys.
light?
On film, okay.
And there
But
we go.
we have Veterans Day coming up, something we always try to remember when we have a microphone in front of us. But also,
Well, if I could, I'm going to pull you this way.
the United
just
States
because we
Marine
wanna see-
Corps
We want
birthday.
to see your smiling face.
which is a great big celebration for Marines all around the world, and the Marine Corps League in Baton Rouge celebrates it as well. Joining us now is Colonel Walt Green. We used to call him U.S. Attorney Walt Green. Now he's in private practice, but he is still in the Marine Reserve. He wears an eagle on his greens, and he still tries cases, so I can think of nobody better. Hey, Walt, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. It's so good to be back with y'all
Good
again.
seeing you again,
Glad
Walt.
to have you.
It's been a long time.
And Kevin, twist that mic a little toward Walt, if
Yep.
you will. There you
And-
go.
and Walt,
That's
I'm gonna
fine
ask
right
you,
there.
You know, I won't bite you. Come on over
Come on,
a little bit closer.
I'll come sit by you.
There you go.
We just want to see your face.
This
John,
gentleman,
you're good.
This gentleman here is John Gable, and we're going to start a little bit with John. John is a veteran. You are a United States Marine as well,
Yes, sir.
and I understand that sadly, you lost your son in combat in Afghanistan.
Yes, sir.
And so when we come to Veterans Day, and in the spring we come to Memorial Day, I'm sure that on those days it's just a little bit tougher. Where did you serve when you were in the Marine Corps? Let's start with you.
Me, I was in Kansas City, Missouri. I was at the finance center.
You were writing the checks.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I had every deserter in the Marine Corps, so, I mean, we didn't write checks either.
Oh, goodness. So, your son was Army or was he Marine as well?
He was Army.
He was Army. And where was he in Afghanistan?
Well, he was killed in the Turkit province, but since he served in 3 different tours, he was all over the place.
And what was his military occupation?
He was an infantryman. He was a paratrooper. He was basically stationed more often in the countryside and would be out in the remote areas with the villages, with the children. And Mike fell in love with the children of Afghanistan. He thought if we could break the power of the Imams and the warlords, they had a chance to be truly free. And y'all are from Denham Springs, right?
No. No,
Right.
I'm from Chicago originally.
Oh, well.
And,
You mentioned Denham Springs.
well, we
We were
did,
out
we
there
did a show
yesterday.
out there for our sponsor, Salassi Jewelry. But yes.
Well, I'm going to tell you one story about Denham Springs.
All right.
And it's something that affected Michael very much. You see that ink pen you're holding in your hands?
Mm-hmm.
When Mike went into a village for the first time on his first tour, the children were fascinated by that ink pen. They had never seen one. And they couldn't imagine using it. So Mike contacted his brother David and asked for help. He said, I need some school supplies. Well, in Louisiana, we make our own light. And all you have to do when you're a soldier is ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the 4-H club in Denham Springs had experienced the same factor with one of their teachers who was overseas, another part of Afghanistan encountering the same problem. WJBO, Mike Wolf, started Operation We Care.
I remember. I was there at the time. I was doing the middays.
Okay. They sent 3 pods worth of comfort supplies and school supplies overseas. I told you, Louisiana makes its own light, and children, little girls, learn to read and write.
You know, John, I have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of men and women who have served in the Gulf area and many in Afghanistan. And they all have a similar recollection, that the villagers were welcoming to the Americans, that they fed them, they were warm with them, they brought them into their homes, that they knew that we were there to try to keep the Taliban from running over them and forcing their conversion or their death. What I don't understand, and I don't know if you understand it either, is how the other world powers can act like they don't see what's going on in Afghanistan. That we have to keep sending young men and young women there and put them in peril with very little help. I mean, there are some allies that help us. I believe the French go in there as well. But we just don't have much help there.
Are you familiar with Kathy Gannon's articles in Associated Press Reporter?
I've seen them.
Okay. Back in April 2019, she wrote the pleas of the Afghani women to not be excluded from the peace talks because their representation's been dropped down to 10. These women are asking for 3 basic rights. 1, they want a right to an education, the right to read and write. They want to be recognized as human beings. They don't want to be the property of their husbands, where they can be burned, mutilated, disfigured for life, and nothing happens to them. They want to end the practice of child brides, little girls being married at the age of 6 with no way
disgusting.
out. my son would not leave Afghanistan. He would either die there or they would be free. That was his statement. It's a statement that's been made many times in American history. If you look at the Marquis de Lafayette fighting in the Revolutionary War, if you look at the story of James Armistead, the hero of Yorktown, most people have never heard of him. He's a black slave who serves as a double agent for the Americans. He is the fundamental reason we won at Yorktown. He's funneling good information to Washington. They cut off the reinforcements. Cornwallis is forced into Yorktown. And when he surrenders, James Armistead is there. Cornwallis looks him in the eye and knows this is the reason that he lost. But James Armistead couldn't be free. He was not offered freedom. The British offered him freedom and money, but not the Americans, because he wasn't a soldier. He was a spy. It took the Marquis de Lafayette 7 years to get the Virginia legislature to free that man.
Wow.
They paid for his freedom because that was the only way a slave could be freed.
Just buy them out, yes.
You had to buy them out, and the only one who could do it was the state. This man made a decision that many veterans have made. They said, he said, America, my country, it will exist, it will be. And even though he could not be free, he chose freedom for everyone else.
John, if you don't mind, before we talk a little bit more about the Marine Corps celebration, I hate to put it this way, but how did you learn about your son's battle death in Afghanistan?
I received a phone call from a recruiter who was telling me that he and a Navy chaplain wanted to come visit me. And I knew then that it was over. I was in Florida at the time, and they were coming to Navarre Beach, Florida, to come talk to me. A little while earlier, they had visited my ex-wife. I called my son David, and I asked him to tell me whether my son was alive or dead. And he told me Michael was gone. It's an amazing thing which happened there, because that was a really rough night. The next night, or the next morning, I'm at an 8:30 Mass. And I saw a Catholic priest. I told him what I'd been through that night. See, Pensacola is a beautiful town. It's full of reservists. It's full of retired Navy, Army, Air Force.
Yep.
That Sunday, Father exploded. No one had told him. And he said, "You will never insult us like that again. You will never let a parent go through the loss of a child, a soldier, without letting one of us know." And they set up a special means that they would find chaplains from any religion you were. It didn't matter which one it was. You could be Muslim, you could be Jewish, you could be They set up a call bank. All you had to do was tell them. And you would not spend that night alone. They were never going to let that happen to a father again.
You do realize that one of the good things that's happened in our society here in the last 10, 15 years, unlike Vietnam, you and all the other parents, as far as we're concerned, you're never alone. We don't do that anymore. We want to make sure.
I don't know if I can convey the thanks that I feel to the people of Louisiana. I even had a Valentine's card drawn and put in the paper.
I think we should thank you and your son for both of your service.
Agreed. Here.
I thank you for that, but yesterday, thanks to the courage of the Baton Rouge Bar Association in allowing me to talk for the first time, I got to celebrate the joy of the man versus the grief of the father. And there are things that you need to look at and see what a man accomplished and what he stood for and what his values were. Mike lived the life he wanted to live. He fought for what he thought was important, and he died for it. Yet when I look at that flag, our American flag, I have Mike's picture imprinted over one. You see that red stripe that's on there? When I see it, I see the blood of my son and our forefathers. That blue field is the love they had for God, country, and family. Those stars are the memories that I have of him and the joy that he brought to my life. And that white stripe is the eternal hope that we have for a lasting and just peace. That is the promise of our flag. It unites our past, our present, and our future. Patriotism is a civic virtue that runs like a river through time. It brings men together that don't even know each other, and they become brothers, and a common love of our country and each other, willing to die for each other, to suffer for each other, to become less for each other, so that all of us can be the most that we can be. That's Michael's gift to each one of us. And it's a gift we carry on.
I can't think of anybody that would elucidate it better than you just did. John, you come by and have coffee with us any morning. We'll be glad to have you. And by the way, we might just turn off our mics and let you do a little soliloquy for us because you're awfully darn good at it.
Yeah, you're a poet.
And Walt,
John, I wanted to ask you one question. You're obviously a patriot, obviously a patriot with a sincere heart. How does it make you feel to see Americans that don't want to see the American flag? How does it make you feel when you see candidates debating to be who's going to be the nominee for president, and there's not one flag on that stage? Not one.
Let me answer that with a short story. In the 1980s, my father, who had fought in World War II, was from a German-speaking family. He was with the 1st Air Commandos in China, Burma, and India. He fought the roughest of guerrilla wars. They flew in by gliders. They were 1,000 miles behind enemy lines. There was no hospitals, very few supplies. You couldn't keep friends because friends got you killed when you went out on a combat, out in the field trying to find them. It was a living hell. There are no POW camps. There are no quarter asked or given. Your job is to kill as many of the enemy as you can and tie up 10 times the number of your troops. It was a hellish war. He's in Tiger Stadium, the national anthem comes on, they're playing, and he asked 2 young men in front of him to remove their caps, and they refused. My father's livid. And my mother, Rita, says, John, they don't understand. And he said, they've never held their best friend in their arms as he died, fighting for this country, for this flag. And when they heard that, they removed their caps. My son Michael had the same response in Iraq. He too had his best friend die in his arms while he was trying to hold the brains of that man's in his head. That flag means so much more than any temporary differences. We have the tremendous example of James Armstead. We are the only nation that I know of in the whole world that ever fought a civil war for men to be free. We have the Tuskegee Airmen who couldn't vote, but who fought. Every generation has somebody who comes up, makes a stand that America will exist, it will be free, and we will make it better than what it was before. But you don't do that by turning your back on our flag. It is what has united us. It is what has brought us together. It is what men have fought for, what they have died for, and what we live for.
Well said.
and it is no more than a symbol, it's a reality. John, come by anytime. Walt, you sure you want to follow this?
This is gonna be really tough.
Or do you
Yeah.
want us,
This
do you
is
want
gonna
us to
be really tough.
reschedule you?
I
Well,
would,
next Tuesday morning.
and
John, you're a remarkable man.
yeah,
Hey,
Thank you
keep
so
your seat
much.
now. Don't get up.
I would love just to save 2 minutes of our time because John spoke about the day Michael passed in service, and it's a wonderful vignette of the type of soldier and American his son was. So if we could cover that before we leave, I
We'll,
think it'd
that'll
a
be the
great
way we
story.
close the show.
Perfect.
The Marine Corps birthday is something that I remember every year as the son of a World War II Marine, married to the daughter of a Korean War Marine, having been in business with 2 Vietnam War Marines. It's hard for me to forget. But this is a tradition that is unique to the United States Marine Corps. Most people know about the lore and the legend of the Marine Corps. I think they don't realize that the Marine Corps generally operates with under 1 million combat troops unless there is a major war going on.
Absolutely.
It is a small, elite brother and sisterhood now that you never leave. And so we have a Marine Corps League here in Baton Rouge, and we have a Marine Corps birthday party. But let's talk about the Marine Corps birthday gala that happens all across the world wherever there are Marines. Go ahead, Walt.
Absolutely. Well, this will be our 244th birthday, of course.
Wow.
And it is unique to the Marine Corps, and every branch has their traditions, but the Marine Corps birthday is our tradition. And every year, there are no former Marines, so I say Marines who have served previously and current Marines and even young people who want to join the Marine Corps, we all gather to celebrate the people that have gone before us. Not necessarily the people that have passed in combat, but all Marines, because we treat it as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And that does kind of set us apart in one respect is when you see a Marine officer or a Marine Lance Corporal, they're Marines. Mm-hmm. They're not a naval officer or a sailor. They're not an airman or an Air Force officer. You're just a Marine.
You're a Marine.
And you go through the same type of crucibles in different schools to get that and wear it for the rest of your life. And the great part about it is, as John can certainly attest, as through my career, as I've gone through the reserves and getting off active duty, anytime a Marine has called me for assistance, I've never met in my life, we try to help them. Anytime I've had to ask a Marine for assistance who I've never met, they've always come through. And so I think that tight band, never leave a Marine behind, try to go to the worst places and do the best job you can. And what I think is important after serving on recruiting duty a couple of tours ago is that it's amazing to me to see these 17 and 18-year-old kids training to go to recruit school. And they are still the generation who says, I'm willing to give my life for my country if that's what it takes, but I want to fight for the Marine Corps and I want to fight for the U.S. It's just a great feeling to see.
I didn't have time to look this up, but I think we are the only state, and actually it's localized to this area, that has had 2 commandants of the Marine Corps whose family homes were basically 8 miles apart on either side of the Mississippi River, General Lejeune and General Barrow.
That's exactly right. And both of them, of course, General Lejeune certainly does not need any introduction. General Barrow came back certainly several decades later, and his history is he was known for actually bringing the Marine Corps up to date from the time he took over as a commandant and making sure racism was taken out of the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And so that's what one of the best things he's known for.
Wasn't he the one that made the statement that there are no white Marines, no black Marines, we're all green Marines?
That's right, and we still use that term to this day, actually.
The tradition at the ball that I think is most talked about is the cutting and serving of the cake. How did that come about, and what does that mean?
So the cutting of the service of the cake is the tradition that after you read the Commandant's message, of course, which the Commandant issues every year, you read it, and then you cut the cake, and what you do is you show the continuity of the Marine Corps. So you have the youngest Marine, whether it's 3,000 people at the ball that'll be in New Orleans, and the oldest Marine there. And you cut the cake, and you share the first 2 pieces with them to show the continuity of the Marine Corps from the youngest to the oldest and what will happen in the future.
And we also, in Louisiana, we have the highest number of military veterans per capita of any state in the Union. It also seems that we may have the highest per capita Marine veterans of any state in the Union.
That is very true. The Louisiana per capita sends the most Marines into Parris Island, Camp Lejeune, San Diego, and Quantico.
What is it about the Corps that it's so much, as opposed to the other branches of the service, it's so much more tightly knit? It's a family, as opposed to, the other branches of the service, no disrespect to them, but the Marine Corps just seems to be something more.
I think it's because we honor our traditions on a daily basis, that we follow our values, our core values, and we promote those from the youngest to the oldest Marine. The second part is that we're smaller. So if I don't know you personally, if I don't know you as a colonel, I know you know somebody I know. So it's a smaller knit group. We only travel to the east and the west coast and a base in Japan for the most part during peacetime. So we kind of rotate around. The reserves are very small and very close as well. We're not very large at all. Well, there's only 400,000 Marines available at any time to be called up on active and reserve duty to go into combat. So that seems like a lot of people, but when you only have people actually working on a base, it's pretty small net.
One of the big controversies in World War II was when we got in, we had Marines at Pearl Harbor. We had Marines in Southeast Asia, and Philippines, Wake Island, Guam. They did not have any Marines they could send to Europe. And as I remember my history lessons, the British were screaming, send us at least one division of Marines. But they never did fight in Europe in World War II.
Very, if any, it was very small. Certainly they won their reputation in Europe in World War I. The Teufelins, what the Germans called us, the devil dogs, as we ran across Belleau Wood. So we had a great reputation, I believe, with that. And of course, the way we were fighting in the Pacific, yeah, there were certainly some allies that wanted us to bring troops. But of course, as you know, the Marine Corps not being that very big, of course, it plussed up during World War II. The South Pacific was our base of operations, and that's where they stayed.
My Uncle Bud, who was a Pendleton Marine, God rest him, he's gone, but he used to jokingly say, with the grace of God and 10,000 Marines, MacArthur returned to the Philippines.
And if you notice, there were no Marines in the photo of him getting his feet wet coming back ashore. Had a lot of Army officers whose uniforms were still well pressed.
That's right.
Of course, that my father's favorite joke about a Marine rifle squad. My father was in aviation, SB-2Cs and SBDs. But he said a Marine rifle squad is a corporal, four privates with rifles, a photographer, and 2 PR men.
Well, 244 years.
244 years.
Can people
That's
buy
amazing.
tickets to the ball in New Orleans, or is it open only to Marines and their families?
It is not. You can actually buy tickets to the ball. It sells out. It'll be next weekend down in New Orleans. It'll be probably around 3,000 people is the customary number, but it's sold out months in advance.
So you may not be able to get a ticket.
You can't now.
You can't now.
You can't now.
We'll
It'll be
remind
sold out.
people next year.
Yes, early.
Walt, as always, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And, of course, anytime you're free, come and have some coffee.
Thank you.
John, I think we want to give you the final couple of minutes here to go over the speech you made
I'd give John a half hour if he wants.
to the Bar Association, please, if you would.
It would take actually about 25 to 30 minutes, you're right, to do everything I said. But I would like to end this in something that was so very important to Michael. Michael's best friend was Larry Rugal. And Larry is killed in combat in November of 2007. And Mike is asked to give the eulogy in Afghanistan. Mike had called me after Larry's death, and I talked him through the feelings of bitterness and hate. In the audience that day was Salvador A. Gunta, a future Medal of Honor winner, and he devoted 5 pages of this book, Living with Honor, pages 262 to 266, to Mike. He recalls Mike as being the hardest worker he'd ever seen, calling him a fascinating guy, an amazing soldier, who worked you to the bone getting you ready for combat. But I would like to end this presentation with Mike's words for Larry, because as Sergeant Gunter here points out, this is the way Michael felt. This is literally his last words, his last message, his joy of service to this country. Even burying his best friend, not knowing that within 40 days he was going to die. And I can think of no more fitting way to salute the veterans on this day than what he has to say. I will end this presentation with Mike's own words from Larry Rugal's eulogy. I cannot be bitter towards the Army or to the 173rd, because without these great institutions that we all serve, without all of us volunteering to come to the 173rd, I will not have had the best 3 years of my life with my best friend. I will not be bitter. I will not shed any tears of sorrow. I am proud to have known such a good man, loyal friend, loving father, and a warrior to the bitter end. Until we see each other again, Sky Soldiers.
John, we thank you. Walt, as well, we thank you. That is our program for today. We will not be live on Memorial Day. Remember, the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour is when they signed the armistice that ended the war to end all wars. We know that last part was a misnomer, unfortunately. But wherever you are on Veterans Day, if you see a veteran, say hello and thank them. No matter when they served, no matter where they served, they are lifting the load for the rest of us, as they always have, and God willing, they will always continue to do. Thanks for being with us.
This program brought to you by our good friends at Salassi's Fine Jewelry and Gifts at 239 North Range in Denham Springs. We invite you to get on by, see their beautiful 3,000-foot showroom. And it's getting to be Christmas time. No matter if it's a guy, a gal, young, old, they've got beautiful gifts, gems, jewels, and the expertise to match them up. They love educating your customers and giving you short turnaround time on repairs. They'll build to your design.
Yeah, and hey, you know, Kevin's gained a little weight in recent years. He's been living the good life. He has no wedding ring. He even trusted Salassi to cut the ring off his finger yesterday so that they can resize
They're
it for
resizing
him.
my ring for
I
me
can't think of a better recommendation than that.
After 32 years of marriage, I finally get my fat finger and get my wedding
And there
ring
was no
resized.
blood.
No blood. Completely bloodless. Get by and see Renee and Stuart Salassi and their fine staff at 239 Range, right there in the Antiques District in downtown Denham Springs. And we'll talk to you again Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Go Tigers!
Go Tigers!
Go Tigers.